Hello and welcome back to the Unfounded Podcast, everybody. My name is Christopher Turner and I am your host. I want to thank you for joining me. Thank you for supporting the podcast while I've been away these last couple of months. And as we get the show started here, I'll kind of fill you in on what's been going on in my life. And we're going to get back to kind of the original design of the show with this episode. There's no video for this episode. It's just me and the audio coming to you, and I find, or I think at least before starting this, that'll be a little refreshing, especially for me, because for those of you who have been following the podcast or have listened to the original episodes, you may have seen the difference that I'm talking about, whereas the most recent episodes have turned into more topic-based video episodes. The original episodes that I started the podcast on were almost a journal of sorts. And that's how I learned to really appreciate the podcast space, was through cultivating this kind of personal journal in a public forum, in a certain sort of way, at least. That wasn't my intention, but I ended up doing that accidentally, I guess. And in that process, also going through, from what I have been able to identify, the awakening experience. And so a large part of the podcast is, as I've said, a journal, but it's a journal of me going through an awakening process that I was unaware of at the time. And at certain points in the episodes, I do talk about the awakening process, and what I ask a lot of the listeners to look for if you are going through them chronologically is kind of that progression you see in me. And I hope that you track with that. And that's what I've come to realize is valuable about this. I started to wake up because I started to journal, if that makes sense. As I started to talk to myself and listen back to my thoughts specifically, I started to be critical of them in ways that I had never felt before. I started to see that some of the ideas that I would say I believed, I didn't actually agree with when I listened back to them. And that's a really funny experience, you know? The best example of this is actually, I think, one of the first episodes. It's one of the beta podcasts. Because it was literally the first time I ever sat down and did this in this form, at least. And I just was talking about kind of what I had been doing recently, what I had been watching, the kind of information I had been taking in. And one of the topics I talked about actually is one that I completely disagree with now. And because of some certain understandings that we've all come to over the last decade or so, 5 years specifically, but one of the figures that I was talking about in a positive manner in the first ever episode of the podcast was Bill Gates. I had been watching a documentary on Netflix, and at the time Netflix had released, I forget what it is, I'm sure you can still find it out there, but it was basically a documentary. I think Bill Gates produced himself, if I'm not mistaken, that basically sets him up to be kind of the savior of humanity. And at the time I didn't understand why there is I should be cautious of that from the get-go, but I wasn't, and I was really influenced by it, enough so that I kind of took it on as truth, and then ended up talking about Bill Gates as a positive figure in the very first episode of this podcast I ever did. And I listened to that recently, just going back, kind of looking over the journey I've gone on over these past 5 years, and I realized that, man, oh man, I don't like hearing myself say that out loud, especially considering what I've come to understand about the figure of Bill Gates and what he could possibly be tied to. It disturbs me that I could be tricked in that way. But I've gone through a lot of understanding in that too, asking myself, should I take that down? And then there's another part of me that pops up and says, like, the first ever episode of you doing this, you're going to take that down? It wasn't one of the primary ideas of this podcast to be vulnerable and to show parts of yourselves that people don't want to show other people? To make mistakes in front of people so they can see that it's okay to do that? And once I revindicated those ideas, I understood that I couldn't take it down. And there's a certain fear in that. But it's not a bad one. I'm going to try to explain it today. I guess this is where the topic's going to go today. That's actually how I started to rekindle my faith. Was when in these little moments throughout the podcast where I would be prompted by something, something disembodied, not even solid enough to call it a voice, an idea maybe, right? But this idea would be dangerous, not in the physical way, not in the way that I was gonna really be hurt by it, but in a very specific way. It was gonna be dangerous to a certain conception of myself that I had. There was a danger that I could uncover something that I hadn't seen before. If I did that idea, if I said that out loud. And just speaking about it makes me shake. You can hear me trembling, my voice. It was a powerful moment, and I hope a powerful moment for any of you listening right now. That there's parts of you that are so deeply solidified that aren't you. Let me phrase that better. There's aspects that you call you that aren't you and were never you, but have solidified over time because we've refused to say who and what we truly are. And I started to learn this as I started to make this podcast. And so now, using that Bill Gates example, I've gone through a lot of the different episodes over the years, listened to all of them after the fact, because unlike a lot of content creators, that's kind of the point of why I'm making this. There is a weird way in which it has been for me. And I don't mean that in a selfish way. I don't mean that to say that you shouldn't be listening to it now. I'm so glad that you are. There's a deep beauty in the fact that something that I made personally can be of value to other people. And it makes me emotional because that actually is what's revealed the truth of art to me. It isn't selfish to want to do something for yourself. Somebody needs to hear that right now. I can feel you. Because I can feel the part of myself that's felt that before. And in that I hope all of you listening can see how this works. Why you have pain in your life. It unfolds in a tricky way. It's a mystery. The mystery of your life that you get to uncover. It's an adventure. And for that adventure to be adventurous, it has to have these dangers built into it. It has to be scary at times. It has to test you, pull you apart, make you think you're not going to make it. But the reason is for those moments of what you could only really describe as heaven and the resolution. Peace. That's there for all of us, right? That's there for this entire world right now. I made a TikTok a couple of days ago because I've been watching the world over the last year intensely. As a matter of fact, that's basically all I've been doing. Because as you, as a listener, probably know that I haven't been producing a lot of content. And there's been many times, many of the episodes you've probably heard, that I don't know why I'm doing that. There's almost a small panic that developed inside of me at times, worried that I was doing the wrong thing by not speaking. But there's this other, more powerful feeling, not even a voice. Reassurance. That if I trust myself and what I feel, I won't be led astray. And that if I didn't feel like speaking, I shouldn't be. And I feel like that lesson, that sentence, is what the world has been trying to learn this year. It's been reinforced in me over and over again. If you don't have something to say, don't just say anything. Don't just fill the void. Open your eyes and watch the void. Look into it. Right? Be in that awkward silence. Sit in it as long as you have to. Until something that's you comes through. Until you see something that nobody else does. Right? And then you say that out loud. And here's the catch. Because nobody else sees it, it's going to be scary to say. I can guarantee you that. Right? But that is your burden as a human being. The price of consciousness is laid on your shoulders there, in that conundrum. Once you see the truth, you now have the obligation to speak it. And in that TikTok that I made, I said, I don't know what is going on in the world right now. All that I know is that we need to keep our eyes wide open right now. And I meant like starting now. There was something coming through. And then over the next couple of days, I've seen what I can tell a certain obviousness to the world starting to come into being. The separation that's been going on over the last year or 2, 5, 10, however long we want to go back, is coming to a culmination of sorts. Where a lot of the figures that have been screaming the loudest over the last year or 2, I think have unintentionally identified themselves. You know, I've become suspicious of a lot of the loudest speakers modern day over the last 6 months. And I've held my tongue because I don't want to be a critic. Like, truly. Not even just from a principled standpoint. I don't have a desire to serve in that role. I like dealing with new things, new ideas, not tearing down those old ones. And in the capacity that's necessary to usher in new things, then I am ready and willing to do that. But I believe that the critic nature inside of us is something that's deeply tied to a shadow form of the human being that hasn't been resolved quite yet. Actually connects quite nicely to the Joker, the figure that's kind of prominent in society over the last 4 years. Or 8 or 10. And has been highly symbolic of the change we're going through as a society, philosophically and spiritually. That we have been fighting our own demons that we've hidden from ourselves. The Joker represents the insanity inside of us all. And as that first movie came into being, we saw the world erupt in chaos and violence, similar to the ending of that movie if you have seen it. You can actually go back and listen to the episode where I watched that and was living it real time. I think it's called The Joke Is On You. And you can hear some of my thoughts real time about what that represents for us as a society, and then I think you can watch it happen. And trust that I didn't know that at the time. Trust that that was simply me talking to myself and then sending it out to the world. And as I watched that unfold, there was a certain part of me that got sad. As I watched the world devolve into chaos, and I watched individual people's hopes and dreams be crushed by different tragedies all around the world, over and over again, day after day, week after week, relentlessly, growing in scale, culminating in acts of God that wipe entire places off of the map forever. Loss on genocidal scales. I think that's why I've been silent. Oh, that loss deserves some silence. It deserves to be recognized. Oh man, are we living through a time of change? And I think as a listener, if you're looking for some guidance, I can give you what I've been focusing on. And I've been trying my best to not take sides in a way that would turn me into the thing that I don't like. I'm doing my best, and I am by no means perfect, to hold myself back from becoming more angry and villainizing the people that have hurt other people. And I think one of the ways you can do that, if you find yourself on one side or the other of all of this carnage, and you find that hatred building inside of your heart, I know it's out there. As soon as I say the word, I can feel you. And I want you to know that you can let that go. But it's not an easy path you are being asked to walk. All of us, as we get deeper into this chaos, are going to be affected by it. As it says in The Patriot, this war's not going to be fought on some distant shore. It'll be fought in your front door, in your front porch. Right? This chaos is around us. It's affecting our daily lives, everywhere in the world, in different ways. And regardless of where you are, who you are, or how you're being affected by that, I know that slowly over time that can simmer something inside of you that will turn you into Darth Vader. It'll turn you into the Joker. And that is why we have been fascinated by these characters. That is why we stare at them and try to understand their origin. It's not because we have some sick obsession with perversion. It's because we want to know how to save ourselves from that. And I think I know what that is. And it's forcing yourself to keep your eyes open when you see examples of the exact same suffering you're feeling in the eyes of the people that you call enemy. As you lose something, know that that's being lost on the side that you hate too. And know that there isn't an end to that ever. War doesn't end with winning, and war ends through a certain type of exhaustion. You can see this if you study history. Very seldomly does a war cease. You might have a war, as it's coined in a history book, won by a certain battle or conquering a certain nation. But the war I'm talking about goes on for centuries, and it doesn't cease. It continues. And it continues. And that bloodlust, it grows until it destroys everything. That's what war is. There's no greater purpose to it. It is the chaos. It is the destruction. It is the Joker laughing and burning the pile of money. Why? Because he just wants to see it burn. That's why. That's what war is. And we don't want to see any more of it. And so in order to stop that, we have to look at the people that we call enemy and find compassion, because it doesn't just appear. You find it. You look for it. You say, I refuse to dehumanize you. I refuse to act in the way that you expect me to. I think that that's the only option we're being given. I think we're being backed into a corner as a civilization. And we have one choice now. It is our choice. But it's that war that I just described, where it's searching for compassion and finding it regardless of where it takes you. That's what I believe. That's what my faith tells me to do. And that's what I want to share with you. Because that path is not something that I've found in a church or by a specific religion. While I've been guided by many of them and influenced, undoubtedly, that is something that is like an idea that's been given to me. And an idea that I think is given to each individual person when they look for it. And that's why I believe in it. Because for me, it's real. Walking that path, looking for the compassion when you can't see it, looking for what connects you to that person when you don't want to, and letting yourself cry in that process as you feel the pain of all of the things that don't want you to do that, trying to leave your body. You can almost hear them screaming, refusing to let go. But they have no power here. They never did. They never can. Your body is your temple. It's your church. It's your home. It is built for one inhabitant. It's you. And the only way that you act like anything other than yourself is to let that door fling open and to allow other things to fill it up. We slam that door closed when we refuse to act on impulse, when we refuse to act on these lower emotions, when we search for the meaning and the compassion. That's scientifically what I believe our complicated frontal cortex has developed to provide us an ability to choose, to say no to that animal brain underneath that just responds. And it does so to survive. There's a differentiation that can happen for you, and I hope I'm doing a good job as these emotions really overcome me, of describing to you or guiding you through some of this as I'm kind of relieving some of the emotions I'm going through. I think we do that together, you know. I think one of the ways the world is healing is in realizing that the loneliness we've all felt is partially caused by us ignoring a certain innate need for connection, but not the kind of connection that we've been led in the way we define it in the modern day. I mean, the type of connection that's actually really scary, vulnerability, revealing parts of yourself together in a group. You know, I'm brought to talk about confession in the Catholic sense for some reason right now, and I think it's because it's one of the aspects. I was raised Catholic, Roman Catholic, and one of the aspects of confession that was confusing for me fundamentally was that there was a certain aspect of it that was hidden and private, but then you were also doing it in front of a person. So it was meant to be kind of personal, but not personal. And I think for a child that's somewhat confusing, because I do think fundamentally, and what I've come to believe is that forgiveness is already there, and it is something that it's a very, very personal process that actually always only happens with you, but that can be aided when in context with other people. When we're able to view pain through other people's eyes, other people's shoes, live and walk in their shoes, we can relate our own pain to that. And then as we do that, we recognize that we're not alone. And that connects us to God, like by default. Right? It reminds us, there's a remembering in there. And I think there's something in maybe like the tradition of the Catholic confession that's lost some of that. That one of the aspects I think that we've been trying to sort through is how do you get people to confess what they've done when they're ashamed of it, right? And do you need to have that in a public way or not? Well, it depends on how you look at it, right? If you're trying to shame people into acting a certain way, then I would say that that's a negative purpose and you shouldn't be doing that. That's not the way that you should go about confessions, to influence people through shame. But there's another way you can view of, imagine a scenario where you're sitting in a group of 5-10 people in a circle. Somebody raises their hand and shares with you something they've done they're ashamed of. I want you to think in the moment what your reaction would be. What's your first reaction when you're looking at them, hearing those words, seeing how it affects them? Maybe they get emotional. Is your reaction going to be, I want to shame you? Or is your reaction going to be actually probably innately compassion? Is it going to demand that you put yourself in their shoes in some way? Maybe even pull you or encourage you into sharing something that is similar. That dynamic I'm trying to describe is something I think has been lost. There's like a practical use to it, right? And I think everybody's experienced that to some degree in their life at some point. I hope so. And if you haven't, I pray that you do. But I think that is, a lot of the healing can happen there, actually, in this certain type of understanding with each other that we are all imperfect, in that revealing of that, in that letting down, taking off of the mask. There's a breath of fresh air. I don't have to pretend anymore. And immediately you'll find friendship in that, and family even, you know. And so I think I've been guided to come back on here and reconnect with my roots as a podcaster, because the space has become so muddied. You know, there's so many people trying to do this to make money, and every other type of social media. I also think that's why I've been asked to step back for a period, to make sure that I'm doing it for the right reasons, because that gets confusing energetically. You know, I want to make sure that I sit down and turn this on when I feel compelled to, when I feel like I don't have any other option but to, when I'm even a little scared to, because I know it's something I have to say. That's when I sit down and say something. Not when I'm scared that I'm not going to get enough viewers if I don't pop out enough podcasts in a certain amount of time, or if I don't continually pump out TikTok videos on a certain time frame, right? All of these schemes are exactly that. Schemes by companies in disguise, just trying to turn the thing that was supposed to give you freedom into the exact same thing you tried to escape. And I don't understand why people don't see that. That if you created a podcast or you started to be a social media influencer because you didn't want to have a 9-to-5, I ask you, is there anything better with a 6 to 2 in the morning? Because that's what you're doing, aren't you? You're putting in more time. And you're giving yourself less of a break. And I know that because I've done it. I know that because I realize how hard it is to give yourself a lunch break if it's not designed into your schedule, and how you will essentially starve yourself accidentally if you're doing something that you really love. You'll work so hard that you don't even realize you're tired, and then your body will start to break down. Right? So there's a way in which the world of freedom, the thing that everybody dreams of getting to right now, has been significantly complicated by many of the same nefarious actors that go around trying to ruin good things in this world. And I think what we have to do as creators, because that's what you are if you do anything like this, is refocus every time that happens. And if you don't have something to say, sit back and watch and enjoy. And in that simple kind of binary, you can see that in the sitting back and enjoying, you get a lot revealed to you. You get to just, well, watch the people that aren't listening, right? And I think that's one thing that's become very obvious over the last couple months, at the very least, is that people are much more willing in a very disgusting way to risk not only their own lives to get views and to get famous, but also other people's lives, right? To use tragedy as a means of getting clicks and views. There's been so much good that has been done in Tennessee and all of the parts of the South that were affected by Hurricane Helene and Milton that's building right now. I pray for Florida. Everybody that's out there. I watch Cletus McFarland YouTube channel. Shout out to you guys. I know that it's going to go right over you guys, so we're praying for you. Hope everything goes good for you guys and anybody else that's affected by it. But there's this weird way in which all of this chaos, there's been so many people, genuine people trying to help that haven't been able to. And then there's been a lot of other people that have been trying to go out and are, I'm going to try to be careful about how I say this, because I know I can feel listeners. You already can feel where I'm going with this. There's two groups out there right now that as far as I can tell, there's a good Samaritan, and there's a lot of them. Right, and it should be very encouraging, and I encourage you to focus on the Good Samaritan stories because there's a lot of people out there just trying to do good and trying to help their neighbors, right? And I like to believe that's the majority of people. There's also a group of very confused people that have told themselves that they're going to help, but have also conveniently documented every aspect of it and shared it on every social media platform they possibly can. And then conveniently, when there's no work to do, continue to act as if they're meteorologists on the ground. Just an example. There's a lot of this going on, and I feel like that does deserve to be called out. I'm not a critic. Like I said, I hate this part, actually. Really wish I didn't have to. But unfortunately, there's a lot of individuals out there that are trying to make money off of tragedy and benefit off of death. And I just feel like it's incumbent on me to describe to you the choice that you are making if you are doing that. Understand that if you are benefiting off of the pain and suffering of other people in any way, as tertiary as it may be, with an intention of that happening, if you know that's happening, I promise you're making a deal with something that you don't think exists, which is why you're doing it. But I promise you it does. If you want to help people, go help people. And yes, there is some aspect to it of documentation that's necessary. Specifically, actually, shout out to Cletus again. He has a helicopter. He flew out there right away and started to help people, fly into people's homes, get people out. He rescued a new mother and his baby. I mean, it's incredible. And he had a GoPro on the whole time. And so I want to bring that up as an example because you can tell in that video, if you do watch that video, and he even points it out, like, hey, look, I was trying to make a different video, and then this happened. So we ended up going, and I had all this stuff, and it ended up being documented, and once it was, I felt like I should share this so that you can see the extent of the damage, and it was very revealing, him flying over the damage area and really relaying the extent, but also helping. So I think that's an example of somebody that's doing it with genuine intent. There is that out there. But then there's also the other ones, and I will leave you to decide who that is, right? But it doesn't mean you're meant to go and call those people out yourself. It doesn't mean you're meant to go attack them or turn bitter or anything like that. It means exactly what I said at the beginning of this. We're supposed to figure out why they're doing that, have compassion, and then figure out a way to encourage those people to stop doing that and to recognize the wrong in it so they can come back to the light. Because there is no sin that's too grave. Everybody deserves salvation. There's a lot of religions that will try to convince you that that's not the case, but I will promise you, the God that loves you, the Creator that created you, doesn't work that way. If nothing else, because that's too small of an idea. It's human. God wouldn't restrict itself that much. I feel better. So thank you for listening, for being here with me. I hope you feel better. Because that's been on my chest for a little bit and building the frustration. But it's not just in that context, in this kind of destruction in the hurricane chaos, it's the way in which I see a lot of people around the world justifying what is so obviously horrible things. And I'm convinced by the justifications sometimes. And then in other moments I sit back and think, but yeah, that just doesn't make sense. Fundamentally, it doesn't make sense. Fundamentally, people die. I mean, we try to complicate some of these things, but actually, I wonder if they are really just very simple and just choices. The message of Christ was one of nonviolence. Matter of fact, it was one of allowing yourself to be in the middle of the violence and to be hurt by the violence and to still not respond. All the way up to it killing you. And to not be hurt by it, that goes so deeply that it means to not even allow your soul to be scarred by it. To relinquish the anger and the hatred that would come towards every single human being that put you in that position unjustly. Can you imagine the weight of that? When you have done nothing but try to save these people, and then they torture you in the cruelest way that they have and murder you. What that represents to me is that the principles that Jesus was talking about, he believed in so much that he was trying to demonstrate this is the rock you die on, literally. You die, not other people. You do. You don't kill other people. You die. And that is such a terrifying idea. It is so the opposite, the opiate of the masses, that message. It's like injecting fear into your main vein. And then asking you to deal with it. To not let it turn you into the zombie. Man, oh man. I think, and I know, the reason that I've turned away from that story at times in my life is because I was terrified, I now understand, at exactly the thing it was trying to call out in me. That story, the Passion of the Christ, and the path it naturally lays out in every single individual human being's life once it's understood, is one that you cannot turn away from. If you do turn away from, you're turning away from not only yourself and salvation, but you're relinquishing your soul. And I know that because I've tried to do that. I've felt those processes start to begin. I've gone through aspects of them. The ones that God has deemed fit for me to go through so that I would understand what I was doing and how grave it was. So that I can come back and describe them to you. But I can promise you that if you want to choose to turn away from that path, there's a coldness that you can feel that will overcome you, and a separation from something that you don't even know you're connected to right now, that will immediately hit you, that will make you want to run back to that thing as fast as you possibly can. And I've had that experience. And I've screamed at the sky, please, please forgive me. The moment that I felt it. Right. What's unfortunate is I believe there's a lot of that disconnection built in. Like I said, that occurs when you know the path and you turn away from it. What if the path was never told to you? What if you weren't raised to understand the story of Jesus in the way I just described to you? The deep, meaningful, philosophical, and spiritual power that it holds for every human being. Right? If you try to embody those principles in your own life, it lays out, it gives you a map, and you no longer have to worry. Jesus walks with you on that path. And because Jesus went to the ultimate, he did the ultimate sacrifice, there is no direction it can take you that Jesus will not be there with you, suffering, going through it, feeling it, holding you as it happens, right? And telling you, let it go. Let it go, right? If I could let it go, so can you. And as far as I can tell, that's the message the world needs right now. That, God damn it, we need to forgive each other. And we have to stop this idiocy. There's no other way to describe it. It's just chaos. It's just lunacy. It's just hurt. It's just demonic. And through all that, he's here with you. Trust in that. And there's also a reason that you're here in this time. Trust in that. Oh my God, if we won the lottery. If you don't feel that and believe that in this moment, know that you will soon. If you walk that path, I can guarantee it to you. That no matter what happens, that's who's at the end. It's the warmest hug you've ever experienced. So I believe there's a certain rejoicing that's necessary, actually, as the world goes through this chaos. And I mean that with as much respect to the pain that is being experienced right now in every conceivable way that it is happening, the horrendous ways that it is happening. I pray for all of you in the middle of that, and I pray for myself that I have to experience the least amount of it that I need to, that God deems fit. But this is a shedding. It's the same process that you watch a snake go through. Except this shedding, the time scale that we're dealing with are bigger, grander than human beings' lifetimes. It doesn't happen over a month. The earth can't shed its skin that quickly. It takes generations, right? And you can see the skin shedding through ideas, actually. They kind of bloom like a flower petal. As time goes on, or like pages of a book, you can see them kind of flip by. And as they get closer, they come into being, into reality, and they solidify. And then as we learn the incongruencies within the idea inherently, they get further away. They almost fade into nothing, right? This is the shedding of the skin that's kind of constantly ongoing in the earth, but there's also a certain amount of resistance, I believe, us as living creatures attached to this organism can provide in that process that makes that shedding process slow or decay, so that it's necessary to have one grand one. I don't know what's talking right now or where that comes from, but it seems to feel true for some reason. So we're in that shedding, and it's more of a rapid one, so the book's flipping quicker. There's ideas coming up and going by, right? And some of these ideas can be dangerous, actually, right? As you can see now on the national stage. They can be damaging to humanity as a whole. And as quickly as they come up, they will fade away just as quickly if they're identified as dangerous. But there's a way in which if those ideas are latched onto, they can create a lot of destruction. They're held as true and then implanted into a society or hammered down to the foundation of the way we construct our world. Our world will crumble. The world we build off of that will crumble, and it might not take very long, considering the time frame we're dealing with right now. So, I kind of speak in very metaphoric ways right now. I feel that there is some relevance to that depiction that is coming through right now, that you're going to find in yourself a lot of different ideas. And the reason I'm saying ideas is because that's actually, I think, one of the best ways to describe like energy, the way that you experience energy in your own head, practically. It's idea. But when an idea hits you, there's a spirit to that idea, that there's an identity to that idea, right? And it is there for a reason. And where did it come from, I guess, is the question that I could ask you when it pops in out of nowhere, right? The way that I like to treat those, or the way that I've learned to identify those, is as individual identities, right? Things talking to me. And it doesn't mean I have to accept the idea. That's a really important point to make for yourself internally, consciously, is I don't have to automatically employ the idea that pops in my head. The words that come in my head do not have to be said, right? As a matter of fact, there's a lot of things that can pop in my head that aren't me. That's why they pop in my head. Otherwise, they'd be there already, right? Like your memories, like the things you love. So a new idea, while can expand you, can also destroy you. There's a danger in that, an adventure, excitement, a choice. The problem is we don't identify that choice. We don't think at that level yet as a society. We're getting to that point. We're evolving to that consciousness level. That is a real thing that I'm describing. That's a real tangible thing I'm trying to describe for you. A different way of looking at the world, of walking around your day and interacting with people, analyzing the way that you're viewing the world as you go through it, and the different energies that try to influence you along your path. It becomes much easier to identify what's trying to help you and what's trying to hurt you, right? The angel and the devil on your shoulder. There's reasons we have those depictions, and it's because they exist inside your head. You can hear them. And in the moments of chaos, when that animal brain takes over, you can really feel the power of the devil on your shoulder, because it almost forces you to act. And it almost feels good to allow it to. But in that same moment, you can hear the other angel whispering very quietly. All you have to do is say no. It's a harder choice. One that you can miss if you don't pay attention. And if you really haven't paid attention ever, you'll just by default be acting with the other one. That's why you see so many people in the world acting in nasty ways. That's why people are rude when you try to go drive anywhere. It's because by default, they're letting that other thing that I just described to you, the devil on their shoulder, drive them around, so they'll flip you off. Fuck you, right? Because you cut me off, because it's all about me, because that thing's driving me right now. Well, their angel on their shoulder is like, oh, no, don't do that, please, just stop, just slow down, you're going too fast, that's why they're doing that, you didn't look, you didn't put your brother on. Like, it's saying all of these things, you know what I mean? You know you felt that, and then as soon as you do those things, you allow that thing to really, in your own life, when you've been that guy, when you've been the guy flipping people off, screaming out of control, as soon as that intensity starts to die down, almost like that adrenaline drug slowly wears off after 5 minutes or so, you can really start to hear that other voice, like, man, why did you do that? You know, you really shouldn't have done that. Like, you could have just drove by. You know, you probably switched lanes too quickly too. Maybe you didn't see him. There's a lot of other things that could have happened. You know, you just, and now you're burdened by this huge moral weight that you feel because you didn't properly identify what was going on in that situation. That is the truth of this world. That's how it kind of works. And as that's the way that I perceive it, at least. That's, I guess, is what I'm trying to explain to you. That's the way that I see my world every day. And I think the reason most people don't view it that way is because it starts to look like a bunch of angels and demons running around. What's more, the best example I could give to you, if you had to imagine it visually, is imagine waking up one day and you walk outside, you open your door and everybody's a zombie. Save a few people. If you feel that way, no, you're not alone. Hi. If you're listening to this, that's why you're listening to it, right? You notice the zombies. That means you're not one of them. Congratulations. Seriously, because that's a hard thing to do. And I don't say that, I don't use that term to be dehumanizing to those individuals. Those are still human beings, right? I mean it to relay to you a very practical point of a sleepness, a sickness, an infection, one that we all go through, and that is not a judgment, right? Or a recognition of a state that a human being can become. I believe that's why we've been obsessed with zombies, because we've actually been walking around in that world for a very long time. We just didn't recognize it, right? We slowly, our society and the world slowly turned into a world of walking zombies. And as that happened, the conception of the zombie in the creative sense started to become more popular, which is why zombie movies hit a peak about 10, 20 years ago, right? And now, you don't see them as much anymore. It's not as popular, and I wonder why. If we had to analyze it, I'd assume it's because people are actually waking up. There's not as many zombies out there. We're winning the battle, right? That's beautiful. So in the Call of Duty sense, you've gotten to the last level. Well, maybe not, because that's not a good... Last level's pretty hard. There's a lot of zombies coming. Then let's hope it's not the last level. But I think you get the point, right? So, that being said, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. This has been a really traditional one, and one I've really enjoyed. It's brought me back to center and allowed me to get some of the things off my chest that have been really brewing the most recently, and to kind of reconnect with you guys and give you an update on where I'm at and how I'm feeling. I am feeling great physically. I've healed up a lot in the last couple months too. I've been going through a lot of the physical pain and stuff the residual physical pain from some of these changes I've been going through, and it is getting to a culmination, just very slow. And so I've been doing a lot of thinking and reorganizing, and I think that through this podcast episode I might have found the direction that I need to focus on. So anyway, that being said, I want to thank you for being a supporter of the podcast, or even if you just find it valuable, thank you so much for listening, devoting any of your time to this. And if you did enjoy it, please leave it a like, a share, subscribe wherever you're listening to it. I do want to try to get it in front of as many people as we can, so that we can get that message out there, so that we can, right, win the Call of Duty game. You know what I mean? If you know what I mean. So that being said, hang in there. And I don't know when I'll be back, but I am feeling better, and that to me means that this is going to be something I'm going to be doing more of. So definitely look for episodes in the future. Anyway, lots of love, guys. Bye-bye.